Judica County is brought to you by Whitaker and Hamer, attorneys and counselors at law, your law firm for life.
Judica County Radio, your hosts, they're attorneys, and they're at Whitaker and Hamer Law Firm. They're actually the managing partners and practicing attorneys here in North Carolina. I'm speaking of Josh Whitaker and Joe Hamer, and they've got offices located in Raleigh, Garner, Clayton, Goldsboro, Fuquay-Varina, Gastonia, and Morehead City. I'm Morgan Patrick, consumer advocate. Each and every week, it's always legalese. We get into these topics, we get into these questions. You're going to have questions of your own. You can always get answers to those questions by calling the firm, Whitaker and Hamer, 800-659-1186. Leave your contact info, briefly what the call's about, and an attorney with Whitaker and Hamer will be in touch. Again, the number 800-659-1186, and you can always email your questions to the show, info@judicacounty.com. And we're back to the questions, Josh.
All right. Well, this one's more of a juicy fact pattern than a question, but this comes up a lot in our practice, a lot of different ways. But basically, we've got someone. Their question is they bought a second residence, right? So they bought a house, beach, mountains. They bought a second home that they're going to. Their plan is to Airbnb the property when they're not there, and they bought the house. No restrictions online, no covenant. We talk about covenants, and we'll talk more about those. But the HOA has nothing on record saying that you can't do an Airbnb. The city, town, county, they don't have any restrictions on Airbnb-ing your property. And now that they're there, they've had a tenant. The tenant has been approached by the HOA president saying that it is not allowed. They need to leave. And then our folks have gotten a violation letter from their HOA saying you cannot offer this house as a short-term rental, and there's going to be some fines, and that's where we are. So our folks have this house that they need to rent out when they're not there to make payments and make this a profitable arrangement. There was no restrictions on public record that this was not allowed, and now the HOA is trying to tell them after the fact that they can't do this.
Have you seen the movie Saw?
I haven't.
No, man, that's not appropriate in this situation. Yeah, man, that's not how HOAs work. This is what I'll say about HOAs. Their authority, when like justifiably founded, meaning that there are recorded covenants that prohibit activity, their authority is very real, and they have enforcement mechanisms that are very real. And a lot of people don't believe in that. They're like, HOAs are fake, man. And there's people that don't respect HOAs, and they don't pay their HOA dues, and they don't think anything's going to happen to them. And then they get literally foreclosed on by their HOA over like $200 of HOA dues. That's a thing that can happen. So HOAs have very real authority, but that authority has to be based in some actual restriction that is recorded on public record. They can't just make them up as they go along in the absence of some kind of amendment to existing covenants. So in your fact pattern, Joshua, they can't do this.
No, and like Joe said, if me and Joe decide we got a nice 100-acre tract, and we decide to make it a neighborhood, and we own it, and Josh and Joe LLC, a lot of times what we'll do is like, hey, we want this, we want all these lots to be 1 acre, and we want 1 house per acre, and this house should be 2 stories and at least 3,000 square feet, and you can't have a satellite dish or solar panels. We'll make all these rules, and we'll have those rules while we own the property. We record covenants, and we say, hey, this is our 100 acres. These are our rules, and if you buy a house from us, or you buy a lot from us, or you own this property after, this land's going to be restricted. And that's why you see a lot of people get really excited when like a 40-acre piece of land goes on the market and it's unrestricted.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want there. So a lot of property, especially around Raleigh and Charlotte and bigger cities, is restricted in one way or the other. You can't have chickens, 1 house per lot, can't paint your house pink. Fence has to be approved by architectural review committee. So you have all these rules. And that's public record. And you should know those rules before you purchase the property.
That's right.
A title search, an attorney would pull that up and say, here are your covenants. And, be aware of it. And then certainly there are some communities where they do not allow short-term rentals. And it's right there in the covenant saying, hey, we don't allow it. So, if you do it, you would be wrong, right? So if you bought that property and you just didn't happen to see that, or you didn't know, or you weren't told, none of that matters. If it's actually in the covenants, if it's a restriction on the property, then arguably you wouldn't be able to Airbnb your property. But here that wasn't done, and they're just kind of trying to say it after the fact. And that's happening a lot. There's a lot of Airbnb. A lot of people are big fans. A lot of people make a lot of money off of it. It's a lot nicer than staying in a hotel, in my opinion, when we travel. But some communities, right, especially neighbors, like if the Airbnb is your neighbor and it's a party house, they don't like it. And so some HOAs have tried to stop that. But really the only way you can do that properly is to look at your covenants. The covenants would tell you how you change covenants. Then you have to have a meeting, have a certain number of votes, usually a super majority, and your HOA has to put it on record. Hey, we voted, a majority, super majority voted to ban Airbnb, short-term rentals, and put it on record. And then people who buy houses after that would be subject to that restriction. But that's not what happened here.
You made a good point too, man. There's the distinction, right? Like we talk about the fact that if there's no restriction, period, then nothing can be done. But if there is a restriction and you just didn't see it, right? Or God forbid your attorney didn't see it and let you know about it, then that's on you. You're bound by what's on public record, and you're going to be stuck in that situation. Whether you can't claim ignorance to something that is on public record and use that as a defense to doing the thing. So,
and this started a while ago, and right now it's short-term rentals, but there's a lot of neighborhoods, where everybody who lived there full time, and some neighborhoods become rental neighborhoods where a lot of people move away and then they rent their houses. And so some subdivisions, 15, 20 years ago, were trying to make it so that you couldn't rent your house for more than a certain amount of time. They really wanted, if you owned a house, they wanted you to live in the neighborhood. And so sometimes there's not a lot of those neighborhoods around, but you'll run into those neighborhoods where they don't really want to allow any rental. And then of course the short-term rentals has brought that issue like to the forefront again, because I've had some clients whose neighbors Airbnb the house next to them, the condo next to them, what have you, and it really affects their life negatively. But I guess a lot of times it probably doesn't.
Yeah.
Anyway, to change covenants is usually not easy. Your covenants are there, everybody's bought their real property for years and years based on these covenants, based on these restrictions, and to change it usually requires a meeting. Everybody getting notice of what the meeting's about, and then you usually need a super majority vote to amend or change covenants, and that ain't easy in most neighborhoods.
That's true, man. That's the thing. You would think 55 people living together in one neighborhood would all be like-minded and be able to agree, but I'm here to tell you, spoiler alert, that's not the case, man.
Yeah. So that was a good question. That's something that comes up a lot, nowadays, and something that we see a lot of. So if you're going to buy property to rent it, you need to make sure it's okay to rent it, it's allowed, and then even further, if you're gonna Airbnb it, you got to make sure there's no restrictions. And your attorney, your closing attorney, your real estate agents, they can look at that stuff for you. But that's something to keep in mind, because there's some restrictions out there. But that is, I think that's a fine mystery question.
I think it was too, man. I think it was pretty good. I think that's one of the 5 best ones we've done today. I'd say top 5 easily.
Well, and so many of us, as you mentioned, Josh, have really started to look at Airbnbs over hotels when we do travel, and more and more people are putting Airbnbs out there. And so, it's right on point. A lot of people are looking at these different situations, and the HOAs, and people are concerned, so they have to find that even ground. And if they can't stop them, they can't stop them. But if it's not in the HOA, it's going to be tough to keep them from doing it. And of course, I guess they could meet and vote on new laws, but I guess the existing Airbnb would be okay. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes.
All right. When we come back on Judica County, we will wrap up the show. Josh Whitaker and Joe Hamer, managing partners, Whitaker and Hamer Law Firm. Offices located Raleigh, Garner, Clayton, Goldsboro, Fuquay, Varina, Gastonia, and Morehead City. If you've got a legal situation, you can always call the firm. 800-659-1186. Got a question, need an answer? Call the firm. 800-659-1186. Leave your contact information, briefly what the call's about. An attorney will be in touch, and you can always email your questions to the show. info@judicacounty.com. We're back. We'll wrap it up right after this.